Hi, and welcome to the Feel Good Always podcast. I'm Becky Bradley. This is real stories of love, connection, and remembering who we are, where we are really moving from grief to joy and talking about all the ways that we can do that. So I'm here with my really close friend, Samia McCall. Welcome.
Hi.
I'm really glad you're here. So to start off, many people that have been listening to this podcast for a long time, I did change the name of the podcast from grief to joy, but it is still the Feel Good Always podcast because we are moving towards this feeling and feeling good, and that joy is possible through grief. We are going to talk about all kinds of things today. It's going to be a very, very, very powerful conversation. So if you're new to this podcast, it was born out of my connection to my daughter, Keira Bradley. She died in a fatal UTV accident at 15 years old. When that happened, I had soul-crushing grief, but simultaneously was expanded my connection to her, actually my connection to Samia's daughter, Maisa, who has also died, that all of these souls on the other side really helping expand me and my consciousness and leading me to do this podcast. So this podcast is about grief, but it's also about higher consciousness, connection, all of these beautiful things that are happening on Earth as we're all experiencing a massive collective awakening. Samia and I are really on the forefront of that. Samia has experienced this side by side with me, and we have been brought each other in this lifetime. We could have our own podcast where we share our stories over, because we have so much. We could have movies about what we have experienced. But today is going to really be about suicide, because that is the way that Mesa died. And we are going to be talking a lot about cultural norms, grief. We will be talking about our connection for all of those that have been listening and really connect to that, how multidimensionally we are connected. But what they're asking us to do is to really bring to light these systems that we're all a part of and how we are going to break apart these systems. And thank you to our daughters, Keira and Mesa, for helping us have this conversation with you today. So seriously, this is going to be a big one. Very, very important message that is coming through here. You are going to hear things. It is going to make you think about the systems that we're all living in. I promise you, it's going to be big. So I would like to start off by reading your bio, Samia, for those that don't know you. And I'm going to do that first, and then we're going to get right into it. So Samia McCall is a writer, advocate, and spiritual guide whose work embodies the lived experiences of grief, neurodivergence, and soul connection. After the heartbreaking loss of her daughter Maisa to suicide, Samia transformed her pain into purpose, raising the link between autism and suicide. Before stepping into this work, Samia spent years as an attorney, mediator, and law professor navigating the world of contracts, evidence, and endless stacks of paper. A lifelong seeker, she has shifted from relying solely on external proof to learning to trust her own intuition, subtle energy, and the unseen evidence that guides us from within. Along the way, she has also served as a psychedelic integration coach, helping others process and ground transformative experiences. She writes openly about her journey with grief, motherhood, and awakening on her Mesa Space Substack and Instagram, creating spaces where others feel seen in their own struggles. Samia is also a yoga instructor, Reiki practitioner, and intuitive channel, blending embodied practice with spiritual insight to support others in reclaiming trust, connection, and unconditional love. Her story is one of resilience, advocacy, and deep devotion, not only to her daughter's legacy, but to all who are navigating the complexities of loss, neurodivergence, and transformation. Samia and Mesa's father, James, also created the Mesa Space Donor Advised Fund to help advocate for systematic change in a kinder, gentler world, not just for neurodivergent individuals, but for everyone. Recently, Samia helped co-found SEEN, a visibility movement of mothers whose children died of suicide while seeking help inside the mental health system. SEEN advocates for systematic accountability and greater public understanding around suicide deaths. So much in there, which I will link to all of those things that you are a part of, SEEN, your Substack, down in the notes, because people are going to want to follow you for all that you're doing. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. You know, we talk every day. Sammy and I were brought together by our daughters, Maisa and Keira. We met at Paige Lee's grief retreat, but all of this was very divinely orchestrated because we have experienced such a soul connection between the two of us and our daughters. They really showed us how big all of this was that we were experiencing, that it's not just that we connected to help each other heal, but that we connected, that we were brought together in this lifetime to make dramatic change, to be two mothers that are walking through the intensity of the human experience of this very intense grief and simultaneously be awakened into this wild expansion. And I would like to share a couple of those things about how we were shown that we were connected, that our daughters are connected, how they proved it to us. But before that, I would like you to share a little bit about Mesa. And it's funny for me to ask this question because I've never met Mesa in her body, but Mesa is one of my main guides. She is consistently, constantly connecting with me. But I would love to hear and her personality on the other side is very much like how you describe her on Earth. And that is what is so cool, is that the personalities still can come through. Her signs are very, very Mesa. So please tell us about Mesa.
Mesa as a human, yes, as you say, they do keep a lot of their personality in their expansive soul form. But as a human, she was brilliant, sensitive, empathic, loved nature, space, reading, mythology, always outside, very intuitive, question things. From early on, she was questioning anything that didn't make sense. So these systems that we will be talking about, she could spot the inconsistencies quickly and question things that didn't make sense. Why are we doing it this way? She had a phrase that she would use about social norms. She would question social norms. Why is this like this? She would question rules that didn't make sense. She would question hierarchies, and she would point them out. And a lot of times this would cause problems, especially in places that relied on hierarchies, like school, and places that rely on children to be quiet, like a classroom. Um, she loved her family, loved friends, loved being up and loved climbing trees. She had a tree out in the backyard where she would spend a lot of time just up in the tree reading and observing. She would spend a lot of time observing things, and I think that's how she um, figured out maybe what made sense and what didn't make sense. She came in with quite a bit of knowing about the world and maybe other places. She was very connected to the stars and space, knew a lot, was always teaching me here and continues to teach me.
She's always teaching me about space too. So a lot of the signs, like before I even know this about Mesa, when she was coming through to me, it was all space. The moon is, which is interesting because if you're watching on YouTube behind me, I have a picture and it's the moon, and then we've got the sun. And it's like, actually, it is Keira and Mesa will kind of mirror each other sometimes. They are not the same here on Earth in the way that they lived, but very much the same in the way that Keira did the exact same thing, questioning social norms, questioning really everything and forcing me to question everything and really saying, like, why are we doing this way? The school system, I had to homeschool her over and over and over again and asked other people to question those things too. Like you said, just really came here knowing very, very powerful souls, Maisa and Keira here on Earth. So I think that's all part of what's happening. And people were like, wow, you really raised an amazing daughter in Keira. And I know that you get credit for Mesa also, but it's like, wow, they raised us and they
Exactly.
continue to guide us and to show us so much, to help us do this work that they were only going to be here for a short time, which Mesa died at 14 in October of 2023. Keira dies in December of 2023. My daughter dies in an accident. Mesa dies by suicide. And you and I meet, for me, it was 9 months. And for you, it was 11 months after, which is if anybody's experienced grief, that's a really intense, soul crushing time. We were very much in early grief when we met each other. Before we get into all the systems that they're asking us to literally break apart, they say things like break apart the matrix, which people might think that's woo woo, but really the matrix is these systems that we're all living in. And so they're really asking us to start talking about these systems. We will be talking about suicide and the culture around all of that and these systems that we've agreed to. But before that, I really do want to establish for some people to kind of understand and see just a few. We have thousands and thousands of examples of these, but I'm just going to give you a few of how Keira and Mesa helped Samia and I trust our own intuitive knowing, trust that we were all connected. They helped us trust, and us being brought together helped that. So the first thing that happened, we go to this retreat, we meet, you and I obviously connected, but I connected with a lot of people there. We had the least amount of time between the deaths of our daughters and of all of the people and the time of the retreat. But, I felt a connection to you, but I was really connected to everyone. While I was there, I got this board, which I talk about a lot on this podcast. It's a pendulum board. At this point, I had experienced a ton of sign and connection from Keira, but she was able to spell things out word for word. And she had asked me the next day, she told me she listed every kid at the retreat that she was with them. I mean, I'm shocked, just like anybody. I'm like, wait, is this real? And she told me to call you, and I get you on the phone, and she spells out on the board E equals MC squared. And then you are simultaneously, we're on FaceTime, and we're kind of like, what is happening here? And then you look down, and then you should tell everyone what you saw.
A sticker that's of Albert Einstein that said E equals MC squared on Mesa's dresser in her room.
Yeah. So we're on FaceTime. I can't see the sticker. Keira spells out E equals MC squared, and you're staring at it. So this was one of those first things where I was like, oh my gosh, what? How does this work? And it was more than just the sticker, because they're trying to teach us energy about that concept of E equals MC squared. There's, energy cannot be created nor destroyed, right? And it goes beyond that. We started to experience, like I like to call it, merge consciousness, where you would maybe see a license plate like that says Starbucks, and you would text it to me right at the point as I'm walking into a Starbucks. Or an example, I'm in Sedona, I go in a bookstore, thousands of books. I feel called to this book, and I'm going to hold it up. It's called The Raw Material and The Law of One. And I get it. 15 minutes later, you send me a text and you say, Mesa's telling me to talk to Raw. And I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Look at the book I just got. And so that's how the Law of One is a whole nother podcast in itself, but this is how they showed us stuff. And I'd like you to share the Redfish Lake story. I think that's a really powerful one. At this point, when this story comes in, it's maybe a month or two of you and I talking, but this stuff happens with you and I all day long. I mean, all day long. Now we don't question it. They're just showing us what we need to do, and just how powerful this all is. So if you'd like to share the Redfish Lake story, that'd be great.
So I live in Idaho, and one of Mesa's favorite places in the world is Redfish Lake, which is in the Sawtooth Mountains in Idaho. And in 2019, we went camping there in July. We just happened to be able to get a spot at her favorite camp spot there. Someone had canceled. And so we went there last minute. And I don't know how we started talking about it, but I was telling Becky about it and sent her a picture. And she said, "Oh my gosh, we went camping there too, and we shared pictures, and we had a picture of our girls kayaking at Redfish Lake, 1 week apart, a few days apart."
Yeah. So it was like my featured photos, because I share in here a lot that my iPhone will pop up featured photos. And we now know that those photos are usually telling us something that's going to happen, somebody that's maybe going to message me. Um, it was a picture of Kira at Redfish Lake, and then you had a picture of Mesa in the exact same spot, right?
Yeah,
Something like that.
yeah.
And and then when we
And
looked at
it's not a common place to be.
no, and like you, I wasn't supposed to go there. We just ended up there on a drive when we live in California, and they were in the exact same spot. And then when we looked at the date, we realized the pictures were literally taken 4 days apart. So, these kind of things are just, it's like they're like no coincidences. Our lives have been rotating around each other. And at this point, they're telling us we have soul agreements. We're all, soulmates, essentially, that we all came here during this time to make great change. And I can, we needed, Sammy and I both needed to trust this. These were some of the things, and it just exponentially went on more and more from there. And I believe that our daughter's deaths expanded us. And I'm so grateful to you, because what I experience is very, very high connection, and it can be confusing because I'm still living here on Earth, and to have somebody that completely understands the totality of the pain and the grief and the human aspects of all of this, and simultaneously you're like, my child exists more now than ever and is literally trying to help save humanity, and I am just the feet on the ground. So no big deal.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like parallel tracks and having, yes, it's
It's
hard.
a lot.
It is a lot.
So what they're asking us to talk about today is suicide. I have been talking a lot about the difference between different kinds of deaths. And I think our lives with two daughters that both died around the same age, around the same time, and what we have experienced in the way that my community has shown up for me and really the world, and what you've experienced, they're completely different because of the manner in which Mesa died. And so I'd like to talk about that. I mean, there's going to be a lot we're going to unpack that really I would hope that this conversation can bring to light from firsthand experience inside of a system. Um, what happens, because this is very common. Okay, so please share with us how you have experienced Mesa dying and through suicide, and how that feels a little bit different to you.
Okay.
It's a lot, I know. Thank you, and I want to say thank you ahead of time for being willing to share this really hard stuff.
So when Mesa died by suicide, at first I thought, wow, the community is going to come support us, right? Like there's people, there's help. This is kind of what I had always thought would happen. I've always been an advocate for mental health. I've always talked about suicide. We've talked about suicide in our family. I've always been very open about these things, and kind of the opposite of what I thought would happen happened.
Now, you were just somebody that was well aware that this was an epidemic. You never thought this was going to happen in your home, because the suicide is something that you've been aware of and talked openly about long before, Misa, you had any fears that your child would die by suicide. It was just something that you were aware of and open to, and had different ideas around what that would look like if someone's child or loved one died by suicide, how the community would show up.
I have always been aware of suicide. I have always been a mental health advocate. I've always talked about suicide openly. In the wake of COVID, I was aware that suicide rates were rising. I was talking about that openly. I was concerned about it. All of that being said, I didn't have particular experience with suicide grief. And I think that's a different topic and a different issue, and something that's not talked about openly. I think that's different than suicide death, suicide grief. And that's kind of hidden and pushed aside, and not something maybe I understood until I experienced it myself. Maisa had a prior attempt, so I'd had some time to think about maybe what that might feel like to lose my daughter to suicide. I'd had time to sit with that fear, and I will tell you, I had no idea what that was going to feel like. Even having sat with that fear, there was no way to know uh, until you experience it, what
Yeah.
that feels like.
Yeah.
There's no way to know. So people that think they know, I mean, there are some things that you can't know until you live them. Like, I mean, how do you know what it feels like to birth a baby? You can read about it, you can talk to someone who's given birth, you can watch videos, you can do all sorts of things, but how do you know what that feels like until you have that lived experience? So there's some things that you just really don't know until you live them, which is why I think it's important to talk to the people that have lived through something and sit with them and hear what they have to say. And my experience, our family's experience with suicide grief, and I'm just going to speak to mine because I think everyone in my family would say something different. So I'm just going to speak for myself. My experience has felt like there's certain expectations. Don't say your child's name. Don't speak too openly, because maybe that's glorifying suicide. So in our community, we've had the unfortunate experience of having several young people die over the past few years. Not all suicide, several suicides, unfortunately, and some not suicides. The ones that are not suicide are treated differently. Um, I don't think that's intentional. I think it's fear that something, no one wants a young person to die, right? And there's so much misunderstanding around suicide death. In my opinion, there's a lot of the messaging is simplistic, like reach out for help, call a hotline, talk to a friend. Yes, those things help a lot of people. We should do those things. Connection is important. That helps a lot of people. It doesn't help everyone. Suicide is complex. There's physiological factors that aren't taken into account or misunderstood. There's the nervous system that is a huge component that Western medicine does not even really study, or even talk about, maybe until very recently. There's neurodivergence that impacted my daughter that wasn't considered, wasn't identified, and there's not a one size fits all solution. So you can't, I guess my point with this is I look at suicide illness the same way I would look at cancer or cardiovascular disease. It impacts the entire body. So to look at it as if the person had a choice, feels shaming. It's shaming to the person that died, and it's shaming to the survivors, and it helps no one. And it doesn't further our understanding of the disease. And if we're talking about grief, it's not helping the people who are grieving. And if we're talking about we want to talk specifically about suicide prevention, the people who are grieving a suicide loss are at risk themselves. And there's so many things I could say about this topic. Um,
So, the community of your community, and I want to just be really clear for those that are listening. When you hear this stuff, and your assumption is maybe that's just her school, maybe that's just her community, please don't listen in that way because I believe that this is far and wide. I've also experienced family members. We both just had a close friend, Elizabeth, die by suicide. It is the way that people show up for the survivors of the family is different, the way that they talk about the person is different. We could spend a lot of time talking about that.
I will say, after multiple suicide deaths in our community, I felt very much like there was a reaction of, our community needs to come together, reach out if you need help, and all of this stuff going on around us, but no reaching towards us or reaching towards my boys who had just lost their sister. And it felt very isolating. And
So the community didn't actually show up. They talked about we should show up for each other, but did anybody ever check on you guys and your boys? Like,
no, I felt it very acutely for my sons who were grieving the loss of their sister and felt particularly isolated because they felt so different than other children because they were grieving a sibling loss. And they suddenly found themselves in a position where they couldn't relate to other kids who were, didn't have that experience. And they needed support. They needed specific support of a child who had just lost a sibling. And not only just lost a sibling, but kind of just lost their parents too, because their parents were never going to be the same again. And they show up at school and they see all this stuff of like, we need to come together and mental health matters, but the school's afraid to name their sibling because they're afraid if they say the name of the sibling who died that it's going to be a suicide contagion. So they're not honoring the sibling. But the children who die not by suicide, they get memorials and they get benches and they get murals, and they notice the difference. They notice when their sister doesn't get those things, but the other children do. And what does that do to them? Our society doesn't know how to do grief. So, when Keira and Maisa talk about breaking up the matrix, we need to learn how to do grief. But what do we, why are we so afraid of grief? It's a word. It's a birth. It's a birth into another world. Our girls were born into the spirit world when they left here. They're still here. They're teaching us. They're teaching us, and they're teaching the world what grief is. And grief is different than death. Death was a moment. Death was the moment they were born into the spirit world. And what are we so afraid of? Why are we afraid of things we can't see? Why are we afraid of feeling so deeply? Why are we afraid of sitting with each other in these big moments that are beyond understanding and comprehension? Why are we afraid of learning from each other?
yeah, there's so much there. As a mother of, Kira, I definitely felt the fear as you speak of around my grief and my pain. I definitely think there's many people out there feeling isolated in their grief, that it's too much to hold, that we want to know how they died so that we can somehow feel safe in our own experience so that we don't have to think that that possibility could come for our child. Tell us how they died. We don't want to know how they lived because we have an unspoken rule in our culture that we don't speak about the person, and especially if they died by suicide. And we don't want to sit in the pain. And you and I had no choice but to sit in the fire of completely burning down everything that we thought was real in this world, because it is in that birth, that grief portal that no one could save me from, um, that I expanded. And through an immense amount of pain that you and I each day walk through together, we do have each other, and we have it's not just us, we have other friends that help us, but you and I, because we do share this, and that our experience scares people because people are afraid to feel. It's like literally why the podcast is called The Feel Good Always, because Keira spells it out, feel good always. And it's about that we can feel good, that we can expand into ever expanding levels of joy, but it is through feeling. Suicide adds a whole nother layer onto this, that people are confused about it, don't talk about it, don't talk about her, that's for sure, that it's contagious, that if we talk about the fact that someone died in this way, maybe other people will think it's okay too. You can't even look up the word. And I understand that to a certain extent, but talking about something that's widely epidemic and then not going to the people that have survived this kind of loss, that I know with you, you reached out for help. You did all of the things that are suggested as suicide prevention, and the systems did actually fail you. I know that you asked for help for Maisa in the school system because you knew that there was a high rate of correlation between autism and suicide death, and asked all of this stuff, and it was refused. And I'm just going to say all of these things because I know so many things. I also know that after she died, you went to many people in your community and said, here is what went wrong. I asked for help. These are the things that were wrong. Here is how the therapist, here is how the doctor, here is how the school system, here are all of these people in the system failed me, and my daughter died anyways. And instead of going, oh, we could look at this as evidence to maybe help in the epidemic, you were silenced, because we're not talking about that. We're not going to go there and blame the system. The system does not want to be blamed. That is not okay. Don't look at the system, just mental health matters. Hashtag mental health matters. But when the person that has experienced it, which is you, and people are like, calm down. I get that too. Calm down. You need to calm down. As I start to share about Keira, you need to calm down. But you're asking someone that has experienced this. For me, it's like you're telling me to calm down when I'm telling you what my experience is inside of child death. You're asking me while I'm trying to tell you about what it feels like to live deep inside this grief portal and be surrounded by a society that does not know how to feel and doesn't want to look at themselves. And then you are sitting inside of a system where your daughter dies by suicide, but no one wants to talk to you or listen to you when you say, here's actually something we could do to change it, because you're questioning the system. And people can't come sit with you in your pain. They want to talk about, reach out for help, but then you have a grieving mother that is, essentially suicidal herself. And you're like, keep that to yourself, because we're not talking about that. And that is the reality of sitting inside of the grief of, we tell you to ask for help, but when you come to us for help, it's too uncomfortable to sit with you in your grief, in your pain. So we want to take you for a walk and make it stop so that we can feel better. I mean, I could go on and on about this, that something has to change. And for me, a big thing that I am shown all the time, it's this unwillingness to feel, that people are afraid to feel, they're afraid to sit with these things. And that if we all began to feel, like you and I have had no choice but to do, to cry every day, to let those feelings come through, to share the truth of our experience, it expands you for more, to see more. And I believe that part of this suppressing of emotions has been purposeful, because if I learn to keep my mouth shut, to keep my pain in my bedroom by myself, then no one else has to see it. And we can't do this together, when really, if we could come together as a community and sit in the deepest pain with people and come to the people that have walked through the freaking fire, like you, like me, like people that are in wheelchairs, like much suffering. Instead of pitying those people, ask them how they experience the world. Let them lead you. And yeah, essentially, I'm saying, let me lead you. I can say it because I've experienced something that most humans have not and come out the other side through feeling the complete depths of my own humanity and not being afraid. And that's a start. To look at yourself, why are you afraid of this? Why do you treat this death differently? Why do you need to know how someone dies? Is it so you can decide how you feel about it? Is it so that you can tell yourself that would never happen to my child? I would get them help? Because Samia did all of those things, and it still happened anyways. And no one wants to hear that because that scares them.
Systems has been my experience throughout life. Systems protect systems, and it's much easier for the system to make the truth teller the problem than to self-reflect, because dismantling an entire system is a lot of work. And so if you have one person saying, this isn't working, the system's failing, and you can point at that person and make that person the problem and then push that person away, then you're done. You don't have to do anything. And especially if you can do that one at a time, you have a truth teller, and then that you make that person the problem. And then a little while later, another truth teller comes along and you make that person the problem. It happens in family systems and religious systems and education systems and healthcare systems and in the government, everywhere. If you make the truth teller the problem, the system doesn't have to change, and systems generally self-protect. And this is why feeling is so important, because when we feel something strong, it's telling us something. If we're angry, there's usually a reason. Our bodies are so wise. So, someone telling you to calm down when you're feeling a strong feeling is basically gaslighting you out of information that your wise body is giving you. And suicidal people are often people that are feeling something very strongly. Their body is telling them something in their life is not working and needs to change, and they go into these systems, and their systems are saying, no, don't feel that. You the system wants to fix them immediately instead of trying to understand what's going on in their life that's causing this. And it's the same thing, very similar to what we have experienced in our grief. Like, stop it. We don't want to hear that, right? They're shamed. And that doesn't work. It doesn't work.
When Maisa attempted suicide before she actually died by suicide 6 months earlier, what were some of the things that happened when you say that the doctors are like, no, don't feel that?
Her suicide attempt seemed disproportionate to what we had noticed. And this is kind of what led us to discover that she might be autistic, and that I might be autistic too. And that's when I discovered that autism with a high IQ comes with a very high rate of suicide, up to 9 times higher, which I did not know, because that is not widely known. Actually, there's more about that now, but there wasn't at the time this happened, which was 2023. So I started talking about it, asking doctors, talking to the school. The school has an affirmative obligation to identify disabilities in children. This isn't happening, especially with twice exceptional children, which are gifted children with disabilities. The schools are obligated to identify and support disabled children. And what happens is it's not because of the autism itself that these children are suicidal. It's because they're not supported in the ways that they need to be supported, and they internalize that something is wrong with them. So a child that is extremely smart in some areas and then not supported in the areas that they need support will internalize, like, oh, like, there must be something wrong with me. I'm lazy, or as Mesa had a lot of sensory sensitivity. So school in particular was so overwhelming for her. The lights, the bells, the smells in the cafeteria. And she would get overwhelmed and just come home and shut down and not be believed when she would go to school and ask for certain things, or we would ask for certain things. And that can lead to burnout, and also girls in particular, and boys too. Boys do this too. Learn at an early age what they need to do to fit in, and this is called camouflaging or masking, and that can also lead to burnout or mental health issues. And we just end up misunderstood. It's like we're constantly translating in order to translating ourselves in order to fit in to the world, and it becomes just an exhausting way to be. We're very sensitive. I look at it as just kind of a different way of processing the world, and a very sensitive nervous system, which can be a wonderful thing to have if it's understood and supported properly, which is why I think it's important to uh, identify and support these things.
So you went to the school system and said she needs to be tested for autism. She needs these supports. You asked for a 504 plan. What
I,
happened?
I went to the school system and asked for a 504 and was told no, that's not necessary. I was repeatedly told no, she doesn't need support, for mostly because she got good grades.
Yeah.
It is
So
even after her suicide attempt.
yeah. So basically, if we look at this, we have and we could do an entire other podcast, and we will, around the autism, you discovering that you're autistic, really being able to understand yourself in a better way, really being able to face the hard truth that how much the system failed Mesa, failed you. It's not necessarily like pointing so much blame. Like, people get so they like look at you as like, oh, you're trying to blame somebody for your child's death. It's like, this happened. And you want us to share how our child died so you could save yours. But when we try to tell you what happened, like you in your case, you don't want to hear it because you're like, that's all on Mesa. And that's not the case. Like, this is the way that system, the school system, wasn't listening. So something has to change. Awareness of autism, how it can, like, and I was a public school teacher for 25 years. And I know that they're the children that are, you look at them as grades often. Do they meet the standards instead of all of this other stuff that you're sitting in a classroom? And Kira had these things too, where she couldn't look at the teacher and, a lot of sensory stuff. And I would have to like educate the teachers. Like, are we still doing this? Like shaming her for, needing to doodle or whatever and not having eye contact, which is rampant in the school system. And no judgment. I was a teacher, but I saw firsthand just because that we need to make these changes and we need to listen. And it's vast. It's not just one thing, but to see, to be able to identify a problem and then to ignore it, which you have been, and then to have your boys, your family, to be felt like they're not supported in your own grief, to feel almost as if they want to erase Mesa from existence. And that's just the truth. And that's a hard truth. But for me to say, I'm sure for people to hear, but that is the truth of how often people feel, especially, in this case, if you're not allowed to say her name because suicide is contagious. But how do we heal this? Just by saying, get help. But you went to get help. So those things, it's like this is not working. And so I know that you and a group of other mothers that did get help, and you're not saying don't get help, you're just saying we have to go beyond this. And to help those parents that have survived the loss, that it's almost like you're shamed, like you didn't stop it. you should have stopped it. Like, if it was my child, I would have made sure they got help. And it's like, it's not that simple. And so you've started seeing, and I would love for you to share anything else about what I just said or share with us about seen.
Yes, I think well, there's other mothers in the same position where, we feel like, well, we did see the signs and we reached out for help, some of us for many years, and our children still died. And we feel like, well, people they don't want to hear that. That's just too scary of a reality for people. They don't want to hear that these systems don't work, or as was in our case, like, not only do they not work, they're actually more traumatic. Like, my child was traumatized by the systems that we reach towards for help, and there are many others that share this story, and it's not going to change until we have this conversation openly and honestly, and work together. And what has happened when our children die and we go to these systems and say, hey, like, let's like look at this honestly, we're told no. And there's no systemic review. There's no one kind of keeping track of these deaths and looking at, like, okay, and this is suicide deaths, and looking at who got treatment, what treatment did they get, what was the outcome. It's just, oh, that person died. I guess they were treatment resistant or beyond. There's no record keeping. There's no accountability. There's no one looking at it. It's kind of astounding. So we got together and we started a group called SEEN. It stands for Suicide Erasure Ends Now. And it's a visibility movement of mothers like me whose children were engaged in treatment and still died. Basically, so mothers don't feel this shame in their grief. We don't need to carry this, right? We should feel empowered to speak our stories, to say our children's names, and to talk about what happened openly and honestly. If you're a mother listening to this and your child was engaged in treatment or reached out for help, and you felt like this, we'd love to hear your story too. So please connect with us. You're not alone in this. I think there are many who have felt like it's kind of, as mothers, we carry a lot of things. We just do in a lot of ways. One of the things, and it's, I don't think even just with suicide deaths, because I've sat in many grief groups, we feel like, well, these are our babies. We have to keep them alive. But moms can't carry everything. And one thing that grief or this whole process has taught me is just the illusion of control. We don't control things. Um, we just we just don't. And we're here. There are things happening that are bigger than us, and we're here to learn and grow. And we do that through love, not through fear. And when we try to flatten things into simple lines and slogans because we're afraid to lean in and to learn from someone else's experience, then we miss something. So we need to have these conversations and sit with each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard.
Because you're saying that, I know that you've told me that you can choose on the death certificate if you want to include it to have it be suicide or not. The option alone implies shame, um, which is just a societal norm we've all agreed to, that there are patterns that could be researched, but instead it gets placed back on the person who died by suicide. And for, like, maybe the parents feel the blame. Yeah, not maybe, they do. Every parent, even me, with how Keira died. I mean, I know my husband, you search for, like, how could I have stopped this? Even though Keira's was a freak accident, But even though you knew, you couldn't. And but if we look closer at what happened, if we're willing to actually sit in that and not just look at it as this is a mental health issue, but it's actually just like cancer or anything else that is physical in the body, like you referred to as the nervous system. This is a, like a disease of the brain that I know they're trying to help, but when Mesa or another person, they essentially get 5150'd. Okay. When you're suicidal, and I know you've described to me that these places that you go, psych wards, they're like prison. And that is a whole nother thing that has to be looked at. Do I have all the answers? Do you? No, we're not saying don't seek help, but it has to go beyond that. We just call 988 and ask for help, because many times people do ask for help, and the help that is given, like you asked for a lot of help, and it's not that you're blaming people, but you're like, look what happened,
Yeah.
right?
What is the help? We need to examine what is the help? What does that look like? And is it appropriate for everyone? Like when we look at the cancer rates, I think we critically examine like what are the treatments that are available? Are they actually helping people? And what is causing cancer? We don't look only at the people that are dying. We look at societal reasons, right? Like, oh, like is sun causing cancer, or are chemicals in the environment causing cancer? And we need to look at like, well, what are the environmental things that are causing suicide? There are lots of things. If someone is dying because their environment is difficult, you can't place all of that on the individual. Mental health is not all on an individual. If someone is being abused, they can't fix that on their own. We've created a society where we put the onus on the individual to fix everything in their life, and we've kind of taken away the community. And so, okay, if you're miserable, if you're suffering, you alone have to fix that, regardless of what's going on around you and how miserable your life is. And, and how poor you are, how much like racism, ableism, abuse there is around you. What?
Yeah. And they will put somebody, let's say, for example, a neurodivergent person that's extremely sensitive, and will put them in the school system and then ask them to sit in a desk all day, to be in the fluorescent lights. I mean, this goes for all kinds of, it's like kind of what happened with Keira. It's like there's a problem with her if she can't, but it's like you're putting people in a position, in a system, saying, if you can't do this, there's something wrong with you. And that's just not the case. And then, yeah, it just perpetuates itself, that we have to continuously be willing to question everything, to be open, to not be afraid to sit in the pain and the fear of what this means, to do something different. And that's what Maisa and Keira are showing us too. When you have this thought about somebody that has died by suicide, I just invite anyone that's listening to question, to observe how you think. Implicit bias, this happens in racism. I watch my own thinking around things. I am not innocent of any of this. But when the thoughts come, I go, wow, who taught me that one? And it's a system that we're all living in, that we're agreeing to. So we have to like kind of just be aware that we're living in these systems where maybe somebody, a truth teller, wants to say something different, and the system wants to eat them alive for trying to disrupt the system. And we have to, because suicide is an epidemic, along with many other things that we're watching happen in the world, as it seemingly is not doing well. And I thank you for sharing this part, this part, which is a big part. I know your autism advocacy is a huge part of your life and what you're doing, and we're gonna talk more about that the next time we come And that's really through your own lived experience. It's like we're looking to experts to tell us, like my doctor trying to tell me about grief that has not experienced child loss, and then now diagnoses me with prolonged grief. Like the women, the men, the people that came to save me and help me through the deep grief portal were the people that have experienced it. So look to the people with lived experience and ask them how they experienced and what can we do, instead of silencing them and saying, we don't talk about that. So it's just something for people to be mindful of,
So
We're
important.
bringing the darkness to light. And Maisa, thank you for showing us this and asking us on a podcast where I'm almost always sharing about higher consciousness, that this is what they're asking me to do, to bring what I know is that we have this wild amount of connection, but bring it into how do we change, how do we move everybody into that truth, which is only love is real, right? We've experienced it, but we only experience that for our willingness to not be afraid. The fear for me is gone because I've experienced it. I'm pretty surrendered. And I know that they're helping, right? So with that, I would just like to ask you if you have anything that you would like to say further about this for anybody that's listening around suicide, survivors of suicide, that they could do in this instance.
Around suicide loss, grief,
Yeah.
my advice would just be to same thing that you are always saying, Becky. Feel everything. Everything you feel is valid. Like, feel it all. I would not tell anyone to feel anything differently other than what they're feeling in the moment, and be present. Be present with what you're feeling, and do your best to connect with people in your life that can hold space for what you are feeling, whatever that is.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
That's all we can do for each other as human beings. Feel what we are feeling in the moment and witness each other and hold space for each other.
It's such a beautiful thing and it's so simple. And so, yeah, people are listening and it's like, what do I do? Because it is big and it can feel overwhelming. All of the systems. A start would be to feel your own feelings and see if you can expand your capacity to sit with others in theirs.
Just
It's not easy, it takes practice. See if you can expand that. Try it out. And if you can't, that's okay too. But we're just an awareness that maybe I can't because I'm so afraid that we will survive our feelings. We know this. And sometimes the feelings can get really, really big.
And you
I w-
just said something so important. I think it's so important just to name if you can't, and that's okay too. Just say, "Look, this is not something I can hold space for right now, or I can't sit with this." That's so important, and that's okay. Naming capacity, because I think when people can't and then they do something else instead of just saying I can't, that causes a lot of problems too. So just saying it, knowing and being able to name what your capacity is important and beautiful.
It's really, yeah, the awareness of your own capacity. Because I say no to things all the time, and we have to, especially in our life. But we also are sitting with it a lot of it, and it's no judgment on where you are at, but an awareness of it. And we have switched the name of this podcast to Grief to Joy. And that mostly is to bring in people. It's still the Feel Good Always podcast. The word grief brings in the people. And I do believe that grief is a portal. It is a portal to awakening, that people that have experienced profound loss, grief awakens us. And people might not know yet that it's going to, but the word alone brings people in. And that is why I changed it. Listen, these aren't my ideas. The team is telling me it's got to be grief to joy. And they've been telling me for a while. I just wasn't willing to listen until now because I was not, you know why? Because I don't want to sit in grief culture. I don't really love the grief culture as it is right now. And they're like, okay, we'll change it. So grief to joy. And I would love so here we go. One little step at a time. Grief to joy. And so I don't like the word grief because I don't like grief culture. So I have to change the meaning of the word grief, just like I did with the word death to me. I didn't like to say death because death to me didn't mean what most people meant. And so we changed the meaning. So one of the last things that I would like you to share is what this grief to joy means to you.
When I think of grief to joy, I don't see something linear. I think of more grief and joy, or joy inside grief, or grief inside joy. Like they're together, they're intertwined. It's like one big ball of yarn, and it's like you recently said, everything all at once. You don't separate them. You should just feel it all. Because for me, grief completely broke me open to everything, and I didn't have a choice. I was shattered and I couldn't do anything about it. And inside of that, I found, like you, a kind of joy and peace that I didn't even know was available. But I can't separate them because I still feel the grief, and I always will. They go together. I can't feel one without the other. I'll always miss Maisa in her body, and that human experience of being able to give her a hug or smell her. But I have a different relationship with her now. She's expansive. I know her in a different way, and I feel in a way that I couldn't before. And that's what grief to joy means to me.
So beautiful. Makes me want to cry because I can relate to that. Like, there are no words that could adequately express the level of connection that our children have showed us is possible. There's just no words. And the that we can communicate in different ways, and of course we miss them physically, but they're still, yeah, very much still right here. And that's not just words that I'm saying because I heard someone else say them. It's a feeling, and which brings me to feel good always, which I would love for you to share, because that's what Keira's been saying since the beginning. Feel good always, feel good always. And what that means to you.
Feel good always. I love the double play. You have to feel through your feelings in order to be okay. Feel everything. Listen to the wisdom of your body. For me, I've spent a lot of my life disconnected from my body because I wasn't safe to be in my body. I lived in my head because I had to. But my intuition is here. It's in my body. So the feel good always is learning how to come home through feeling everything to the wisdom of my body and my heart, and where Mesa is, and the divine, and all these beautiful souls we connect with, and everything, and love. And it's not always easy because feeling is hard and beautiful. And that's what we're here for, to feel.
Thank you. That is what we're here for. And that's what I would hear in the depths of my own. I did throw myself on the ground, screaming and crying, feeling the depths of this grief, this unrelenting grief, where I had the team, Kira, Mesa, my higher self, my future self, just, I would hear, you have to feel this. You have to feel all of it. That is what you came here for, to fully expand your soul. And we don't get to skip this part.
No.
But we are capable, and it's what allows us to expand and to do what we're being asked to do today, which is stand firmly in the truth of our experience, to share it and to listen and to question everything, and to not be afraid. A mother's love and bond is stronger than anything I've ever experienced. And so I know Keira and Mesa help us to let go of what anybody might think of us to say what we need to say. And it's pretty powerful to witness. If you're listening, I'm grateful that you're here and, you know, share this with somebody that needs to hear it. And they don't have to have had suicide touch their lives. It really needs to be shared with everyone because there's so much that you shared here. I am forever grateful to you. I love you so much. I love Mesa. I don't know how I would do life without you. I just don't. And you were sent to me. We were sent to each other, and it was always going to be this way. And that we're going to keep doing it. And I honor and appreciate that your willingness to show up and do the hard things and to be a great teacher for me, and to all that are listening. So thank you.
Thank you. I love you.
I love you, and I love you, Kira and Mesa, and thank you. And until next time.